Welcome to another episode here on the Kyle High Club. My name is Kyle. I got another very special guest here for you guys today. His name is Johni Holiday. Welcome, Johnny.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I was expecting like a loud guitar noise to start. That's usually how it goes when somebody says Johnny Holiday, and it's like, where? But yeah. So
should I redo it where I make like a vocal, like a cappella electric guitar intro?
Yeah, do like a slide.
Okay. Hold on. I've got one. Yeah. Welcoming Johni Holiday.
Well, yes, indeed. Hello, how are you?
I'm spectacular. Thank you very much for asking, Johnny. So, Johnny, welcome to the show. Tell us who you are and what is it that you keep yourself busy with?
I am Johnny Holiday. I think we've established that by now. We've said that 7,000 times at this point.
If someone didn't recognize this guy's name is Johnny Holiday, get it through your mind.
Yeah, and I am the vocalist and guitarist and I guess lyricist for a band called Ruff, Majik, which is spelled horribly, but it sounds nice.
And you would actually crucify people when they don't spell it correctly. It's like, what? You don't know how to spell my band's name by now.
No, when they do spell it correctly, they have to spell it wrong for it to make sense. You know what? There's a real fun thing about the way Rough Magic is spelled. It's not because I don't know how to spell. It's because I was looking to make it not look boring. Because when you write out Rough Magic, it looks boring. And then I was like, okay, so I just need to drop some other letters in here so we can have an interesting logo, which we did. But then we had the unintended spectacular side effect that it's exceptionally search engine optimized because of the spelling. So if you type in Rough Magic the way we spell it, it's all you find. And I was like, yes, this was the plan all along.
Unintentional miracles happened because you needed visually appealing letters for your band.
Yeah, and then things just kind of worked out. But if anyone ever asks, it was a plan. Like that was my intention to be to be as recognizable as Facebook.
I see a lot of people has got this trend to replace a U with a V. I see that going on lately as well, also for the search engine vibes.
I think that comes from the 90s Scandinavian like black metal and death metal scenes, and a lot of people that were inspired by that idea where they would spell cult as KVLT. That was a thing. And if you spelled true, you would use a V instead of a U. I'm not really sure why that happened, but it's yeah,
I see it. I see it seeping over to pop now as well, just for the SEO purposes. It's quite interesting,
for sure.
But
yeah, definitely. But
no, go for it.
Sorry. No, I was just about to say I don't think the initial intention of it was to be search engine optimized. I think they assumed it looked more badass. You can only have pointy letters. You can't have any round letters.
I like pointy letters, and Rough Magic does have, the correct amounts of pointy letters to make it visually appealing.
That's right, but we also have round letters because we have to keep a balance.
That's what makes that magic so rough, is because you round around the edges.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes it's it's smooth and pointy. That's the point.
That is the point. Ha ha. Anyway, Johnny, your band has gone through quite a big metamorphosis. I mean, you guys started as a 3-piece, and now you've got like this whole entire rock and roll orchestra happening. Do you mind elaborating on that?
Oh, it's I think it was a move of necessity in my head, because when I started working on our last album, which I still owe you a vinyl of, by the way,
nice.
yeah, I started writing music that I realized I was not going to be pulling off as a free piece, and it was just not going to happen. And I didn't want to be one of those bands that, you know, they start off as a three piece and then eventually they're still three piece in terms of everything media related. And when they play live, there's like 7 people on stage, but the stage lights only shine on, you know, the 3 members that the world knows. And I was like, that's lame. You know, I'll just I don't want to be that guy. You just have this dude standing in the background draped all in black, or maybe a green screen, and he's playing a keyboard his hardest, but nobody can see him. And I was like, that's
You don't want the
horrible idea.
world to look at your session musicians as lame.
Yeah, yeah, or be like, oh, shame, that poor guy, he came all this way and nobody's even seeing his face. No, but so then what I did was I went an absolute extreme opposite with it, because then I got some really fantastic musicians to join the ranks, and then you know, I was like, now got them contributing on everything in terms of, you know, vocals, like taking over singing duties in some songs, and, you know, filling in on all of the nice harmonies and, you know, different guitar and whatever. And then I was just like, you know, it has to be a big band then. It's not, you know, it's not just 3 guys and some other guys.
But it's also fun to watch because it's like watching a literal musical chairs, because you guys swap out guitars and instruments, and then this guy is playing piano and that guy is playing bass. It is visually so fun to watch. I love it.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, because I'm not sure everybody in the band enjoys having to swap so many instruments. But it's just like, that was a thing that happened. Was I was like, well, you guys can play all of these things, so just play all of these things. You know, that it would make for a fun live show. But honestly, it is a bit of a pain in the ass to swap around during sets and have people take over each other's instruments. But it looks cool, so I'm just gonna, you know, keep having us do it.
Yeah, but how does that work though? Because then this guy's playing bass and that guy's playing guitar. So how does that work? How do you guys plan that, something like that? I mean, like I say, it's fun to watch. I mean, but I can just imagine the planning that goes behind it is probably a logistical nightmare.
Well, the setups are the same, you know. Like when we do sound check or whatever, it's we sound check everyone in their like little space and whatever, and sound check all the instruments, and none of the settings or things particularly change. So, you know, people just swap over, and everybody has a couple of spare guitars or whatever. So, like,
Everyone
Jimmy would
has a
have,
couple of spare guitars.
yeah, well, they have to have them. Like, Jimmy or Bez would be on stage, and each of them would have either a guitar and a bass, or I think Bez has 2 guitars and a bass, because we're also doing different tunings. And like I said, this is quite a headache for, I think, a lot of the guys in the band. But also at the same time, I see them enjoying the other instruments though, because they're like, oh, now we have to swap around. And then,
Yeah,
you know,
finally.
you see the guitar guy playing the bass, and he's like, yeah, this is the vibe. So, you know.
I actually got to
Yeah.
see you play bass for Earford as well. That was quite a treat to see. I don't think I've ever seen you play bass before that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's my most fun instrument to play. I like playing the bass, but it's a whole different thing live. Like, my arms got so tired, and then I was, yeah, it's cool. And then halfway through, I'm like, oh, this hurts. This is not as easy as playing guitar. I just want to be playing guitar instead.
How long have you been sitting on the idea of Ruff Majik? Where did it come from? How long have you guys been playing, or how long have you been, you know, playing in your bedroom saying this is going to be my band's name? How long have you been doing this?
Well, Rough Magic as is only came about, I think, in like the beginning of 2015, when we were working on an like a garage EP, like a really, really garage EP. And yeah, we then it all kind of came together. But I had plans, and I was envisioning something for a long time, probably since I was in high school, I'm guessing. But it only really came together around 2015 when I kind of got all of the crazy pieces together, and then it kind of makes sense, and then that's what happened. I don't. That's a very wishy-washy explanation. I'm sorry. I'm going to try and think of something better.
No, that's fine. Don't worry. I love also. I also love the word wishy-washy explanation. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it went down.
Where did your love for guitar come from? I know you come from a very quiet town, and I guess there's not a lot of music that happens there. So how did your love for music come from?
Well, I mean, that's exactly it. It's a very quiet town. Nothing much is happening. And then you just want to kind of be loud. You just want to be like, why is it so quiet around here? But, well, I mean, I say that jokingly, but I also mean it. But in terms of, I guess, musical taste and being or finding music, that was very much down to my family's influence from different sides. My dad was the first one to introduce me to bands, I think, like The Who and Jethro Tull and, many others. Everything from 60s and 70s. And that was like a foundation that I was raised on. And my mom introduced me to a lot of lyricists and songwriters such as Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, and also Neil Young and Don McLean. Lots of just fantastic musicians, but amazing lyricists, and that kind of also became a part of my foundation of what went into Ruff Majik. And then I was born in the 90s, but only in 92, so I was around in the 90s, but I wasn't taking
only
much
in 92. You made it sound like it's a bad thing.
No. I mean, just like when people talk about the 90s, people that were like born in the 80s or whatever, for instance, they were in their teens and experiencing grunge as a force, and all of the music that was happening around then. They were experiencing it as they were, kind of ready to appreciate it. And, that time I was still rubbing sticks in the ground and
eating I don't know.
Stuff. Stuff like that. And then I guess by the end of the 90s, when I was becoming more of a cohesive person, then my sister, who's a bit older than me, she had obviously listened to a lot of this music as well. And then that was my first kind of intro to what I would say was modern rock, was whatever she was listening to throughout the 2000s and what she had picked up in the 90s. So it's a very mixed what's that word that people use, smorgasbord of different influences that kind of got me to
but you had a very musical family, so everybody enjoyed music and stuff like that in your family. So you were from a young age very influenced by what was already happening in your family.
For sure. And that was something that at that point felt very kind of secluded to our family in this town, because growing up in a small Afrikaans town, that's what you would hear was like Afrikaans doof music and that kind of thing. And then I always just assumed nobody else knew about this other music that exists, like nobody had ever heard of Pink Floyd or whatever. And you would hear the occasional "I Want to Break Free" at a wedding, because that's classic. You always hear those at weddings. But but other than that, it's usually just not very great music that was around. So that was I think a very fortunate thing for me growing up in this town. Otherwise I would have, I don't know, become a sucky musician maybe. And I'm saying sucky as in the the dance, not sucky as in this sucks, but it would have sucked.
It would have sucked to be a sucky musician.
Yeah, sucky. Just for people that are listening that are not in fact English, it is not in fact Afrikaans. It's spelled Sakkie, and then you have two of those. It's I don't
But
know
it's
what
okay.
it is. It's a shuffle of some sort.
You guys don't have to research that at all. You're not missing anything at all. So
Yeah. No, but do research it.
No.
just give it a shot.
I say no to whoever's listening. Don't listen to him. Anyway, but your a lot of people don't know your father actually made you one of your guitars.
That is correct. He built my guitar, which I do not have with me at the moment. That guitar is in Germany, and I will hopefully be reunited with it soon because I've been too worried to have it shipped my way. It's in a safe space. I know it's safe where it is, but I'm horrified to try and have it shipped back. Otherwise, I would have, but I'm too afraid it gets, broken in the post or whatever, and it's not really something you can replace.
No. So how old were you when your father made you this guitar?
This wasn't so long ago, but then again, I have no perception of time anymore. I might have been 24, maybe I was 25. No, sure, this is crazy. It might have been 5 years ago, it might have been 6 years ago, but let's say somewhere between 23 and 25. That's how old I was.
Okay. And has he made guitars before?
No, he only ever did make the one.
So your dad only made one guitar ever, and that was that guitar?
Yep. So yeah, it was a really cool thing to see, and it sounds fantastic. Yeah, I guess it's one of my, it is my favorite guitar. But I now have, since that one was in Germany, I got some extra backup guitars around here, and my thinking is when I do eventually get there and I get it, I'll probably keep it for recording purposes and have it somewhere safe, because like I said, it's not really replaceable. The other ones I can replace, and I can put some insurance on them or whatever. But
you can't insure sentimental value. Of course, you can't do that. So there's no insurance for sentimental value. But how did the picture of yourself end up on the guitar?
Oh yeah, that was the whole thing. So the thing is, he started making the guitar and he special ordered a stencil of my face, which was a photo that was, if I remember correctly, it was taken by Christelle Dievenage. She took a photo of me when we were playing a show. I don't remember where it was. And he went through a lot of trouble to, get it in black and white and do the contrast and whatever he could do right, so they could actually make a stencil of my face that would then be airbrushed onto the guitar. And so he managed to get that. I think it might have been made in Japan. It's like this really crazy story, but I didn't know beforehand. And then he made the guitar, or he was making the guitar, and he was surprising me with the stencil. Like, he had just painted and it was like, look, we've done the stencil of your face and it's on the guitar now. And if I had known before, I would have probably tried to not have my face on my guitar, because it kind of looks like I'm just really full of myself. But then at the same time, he had gone through so much trouble, and it was such a sweet gesture, and I wasn't going to explain the whole thing. And I was just like, what, fuck it. If people think I'm full of myself, that's it. Whatever. And then I decided, I have that stencil still. It's in a box here in Leidenburg, so I want to grab it. Now I'm just going to paint my face on all my guitars and just be like, I don't care.
So you can always play with yourself.
Yeah.
No matter where you go in the world, you can play with yourself in public.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, that's not a thing that a lot of people have. Not a lot of people have a guitar with their own face on it.
No, I mean, not a lot of people have a guitar, number one. And number two, not a lot of people who do have guitars have their own faces on it. And I also think
Exactly.
it's an ultimate flex if you can tell someone, when last have you played with yourself in public? Never. So,
Yeah.
and you can do it on the
In,
stage
yeah, exactly. Like amplified even.
and not be arrested.
Yeah. Well, you might be arrested. It depends what you're doing, but I mean, yeah.
If you're actually playing with yourself. So, but
Oh,
the
no.
the guitar's got extra sentiment because your dad is no longer around.
That is correct, yeah. He unfortunately did pass away from cancer, and that was about 3 years ago now. I was doing the math in my head earlier, and I might be wrong. It might have been 4 years, but like I said, I've lost all perception of time at this point. Um, but yeah, so it's like that's what I'm saying. It's a absolutely irreplaceable object for me because there will never be another one.
If I may ask, because I'm struggling with copious amounts of anxiety and depression due to traumatic events. Would you say your father's passing amplified it, or was it something that's always been part of your life, anxiety and depression?
I think that was probably uh, a big part of what set it off for me. Like I would imagine that I always had some semblance of it uh, inside of me. Unhealthy coping mechanisms and not actually. Wait, just hold on for 1 second. I need to open the door for a dog.
Okay.
Just give me a second. There we go. And let me close the door again. Fantastic. Yeah. Uh, sorry about that. No, it's always been a thing, I guess, but not something that I paid any mind to because it wasn't, it was never a problem. It never got to a point where it was actually uh, debilitating, I would say. And
Yeah.
then when my dad got sick, when he got diagnosed with cancer for the first time, I went into an absolute spiral, which I think started with anxiety, not with a depressive side of things. Like I wasn't necessarily uh, sad, not more than uh, one would obviously be when someone is diagnosed with cancer. But I went into a anxious spiral where I was convinced that I am dying or that I have cancer or that I'm going to have a heart attack or whatever. And that um, is a constant struggle still where, I find myself going through the motions and working myself out of it and then, falling back into it. And I think that's kind of what set it in motion was realizing that at that point, um, I don't know. I think it was my first real grapple with mortality, and that
Yeah.
kind of, yeah, it just flowed into all sorts of other anxieties. Yeah,
I think
and
because
it's
because it's kind of like you've never been aware of the magnitude of anxiety, and now that you can actually pinpoint that feeling towards something, you become aware of so much other things in your day-to-day life that you actually didn't really connect towards anxiety.
exactly, yeah. It's like it has become tangible to some degree.
Yeah, because I think there are so many things as a child and growing up that you didn't know the magnitude of the stress of a certain type of situation because it never really phased you. And I think confronting mortality actually is kind of like that gateway drug in between inverted commas to anxiety, because you start to question your own mortality, and you become anxious about other things that you never really thought about that might impact you, but it is actually impacting you on a day-to-day life.
Exactly. Um, And that's what I said. It's just it becomes a spiral of sorts. There was I had been overseas a couple of times before, the band started kind of taking off, and before I was an anxious mess. So at that point it was yeah, but at that point it wasn't a problem for me. Like, I had flown before, and it was never particularly liked it, but it wasn't the issue. But then after this kind of spiral of anxiety started, I started to have ridiculous flight anxiety. Like, every time you need to get on a flight to go on tour or whatever, it's there's a crazy amount of work that goes into, yeah. And there's always just that last minute, last 4 or 5 minutes before a flight, where there's a very good chance that I'm just not going to get on the flight, where I'm just like, nope, hold on, this is not happening. I'm in control of the situation. I do not need to be on this plane. And then, I always end up managing to convince myself that I do indeed need to get on this plane. And then it's about 10 hours of not being not being happy about being on the plane. And then I get to the other side and I'm like, this is fine. Now, I can breathe again.
And then you get people telling you it wasn't that bad. It's like, oh yeah, you're not me, okay?
Yeah, you don't understand. It's crazy. But yeah. No, and it's the wildest thing, because logic plays no part in it. Like, I have this ability to walk myself through it, and I'm like, okay, I have a basic understanding of what goes into making a plane fly. I understand the physics behind it. I know why this thing is supposed to stay in the air. That makes sense. And then I'm in the air and I'm like, nope, this is not right. Something is inherently wrong about hurtling through the sky.
Would you say you have developed a fear of death?
I do believe so, but I don't think it's a fear of death. I don't mind dying. That's the thing. I've been, because I think about it a lot. That's something that comes up when I have my spats of anxiety. It's not so much death or the end. That doesn't faze me at all. I don't care about that. It's like, I'm have come to terms with it before in my life, and I'm fine with it. But I do not like the idea of dying. Like, the actual act of dying horrifies me. So I think that's my problem. And I don't know why, because, I'm not scared of what comes after. So I don't know why I'm scared of the actual instance of it happening. But yeah, it's there. It's not necessarily logical, but it is inside of me.
Have you become more aware of your own mortality since your father's passing?
Yes, I believe so. I think that's that's what I was trying to get to earlier, but not very eloquently. But I think that was, I never before had any fears about that kind of thing, and I don't think I ever thought about it. I was just like blissfully unaware that one day I would have to die, and then suddenly I had the realization that I would at some point have to die, and then it's something that I came to think about a lot after that.
And anxiety to me is actually a very personal thing, because you don't think that other people experience it the way you do. Because um, how I see it is, there's so much in reality what the world expects of people, and what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to make sense of what is going on in my own personal head, because I live there. I'm personally every day in my own head. Thank you very much. And it's just with everything and everyone around you, having their own opinions and having their own visions about anything. It's kind of like delaying the process of you trying to make sense of what's going on in your own mind. I don't know if you follow with what I'm trying to say is, my own personal anxiety is I feel like I'm making progress in my mind to not feel what I'm feeling right now, and it's almost like the reality of the world is preventing me from finding my sanity.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a right now that's a big problem. Like I've been having a lot of issues with anxiety recently, and it is a very personal thing, but I have a opinion about it that I like to be very open about it, because you end up finding people that are able to help, or at least lend an ear when you're going crazy. Um, but yeah, like right now, I think the real problem is the whole world is an absolute mess, and it's, I don't know, uh, it's kind of hard to feel this way and not also in the same sense, or at least this is for me personally, feel bad about it. Because I go through these kind of spirals where I think, this is horrible. Nothing this horrible has ever happened to anyone else. And then at the same time, my mind goes to, no, there's, people having a way worse time. And honestly, that's not how it works. Like, you cannot compare suffering, even though it's a very human thing to do. It's the way your brain works. It doesn't allow you to actually perceive suffering in that way. It's whatever you're feeling for you is the worst thing that could possibly be happening, because it's happening to you. That's how your brain kind of, interprets it.
But sorry to
Sorry.
interject here as well. I get that, because your own problems are relevant to you, but
Yeah.
being connected in a digital world makes it kind of worse, because you start to compare yourself with other people. Then you think, oh, well, I am busy having a breakdown, and people are only, posting a camera roll where everything is going well with them. No one is sharing their anxiety or depression on the internet or digitally out there. And that actually pours fire on that flame as well, because the world expects a lot out of people, and you trying to just make sense of what's happening in your life, your problems is relevant to you. That can actually just spark a whole new different spiral from there on out. I mean, I think it's probably the, like, being in the era we are right now, being connected is also drifting us apart with regards to mental health as well. As much good as it can do, as much bad can it spark as well.
Exactly. And that's why I was saying earlier, I think for me, it's important to be vocal about it and to post about it. And I mean, a lot of people that do follow me on social media, I think might, get annoyed with posts about anxiety or depression or whatever, when it gets to that point. But it's not like that all the time. I mean,
No,
but
of course.
when I'm having a hard time, I like to be vocal about it, because I think it's important for people to understand what is happening with you and with other people in the world. Because if you don't, and if you manage to completely avoid talking about it, outside of the social media sphere, just in regular life, then you end up having a way worse problem. And yeah, that's the thing that I've notice as well, because I know a lot of people that have the absolute perfect life. If you would follow them on social media, and they have, like you said, it's just camera rolls of a fantastic vacation, and this these beautiful scenes from all around the world, and then you would meet that person maybe not 2 days later, and they'd be having a horrible time in terms of maybe depression or anxiety or whatever the hell it is that's happening. But it's not something they would ever let anybody else see, because it's not fun being vulnerable, I guess. And that's also a bad road to go down, because I think in the end, you end up doing yourself in.
My problem is I've become like a very big hermit lately. I've taken myself out of the public eye, just because, it's easier for me to avoid certain topics and conversations with people than to actually talk about it. Because where what I'm trying to say is, me having a bad time relevant to me versus someone who's a single mom with 3 children and still coping with life. How do you tell someone like that you're having a bad time, you know? But like I said, everything is relevant to you, but what makes me anxious is I rather avoid telling people, everything is fine, at the same time trying to talk about what is not fine, because that can go to either or side of a tipping point in a conversation. And I'm still trying to deal with that inner conflict.
Well, so I have some opinions on this. Let me just quickly try and articulate them. So the first thing is, like we said, because I do believe that anxiety and depression and so on are very personal things to go through, and I do think it's important, but for people who can manage it, to talk about it and post about it and be vocal about it and be aware about it as much as possible. But also the split side of that is you don't owe that to anybody, and if that's not the way you can manage to cope with it, it's not something you have to do. You don't have to tell anybody about how you're feeling or why you're feeling the way you're feeling. You don't have to post about it, and you don't have to bring it up in a conversation. So that's one thing. It's not a you have to do it, but I think in a certain sense, if you do, you'd be surprised how many people are supportive and are going through the same thing and are not necessarily in a place in their life where they would want to post it online, but they would send you a DM and they would say, listen, I'm going through the same thing, and it's good to see that I'm not alone in it. And then they would like to say that you're not alone in it, and they've got ways they've been dealing with this kind of anxiety and whatever. And that's really it's opened up my eyes to how many people are struggling with the same issues, and at the same time ways to deal with it and not feel as alone. But that's just one side of this opinion that I have. But the other thing, and because you just said, like, if you're comparing it to a single mother with 3 children and they're having a hard time or whatever, so that's the point I was trying to make earlier about not being able to actually compare suffering, not being able to compare things like depression and anxiety. There's a writer, not anymore, he's passed away a long time ago, but his name was Viktor Frankl, right? And Viktor Frankl was a Jewish man that was alive during the Holocaust, and he was in fact in concentration camps in the Holocaust in that time. And in the concentration camps, he managed to start a kind of a school of therapy or a philosophy around specific aspects of mental health. And then
in the concentration camp.
Yeah, well, I mean, he wasn't actually using that time to necessarily help inmates, but that's when he formulated it, and he was trying to help other people in the concentration camp at the same time. But only after they had been liberated that he started the Viktor Frankl Institute, where he used what he learned from the concentration camps to kind of teach people around the world. And it became really, I think it's a very good practice of psychology. And one things that he did mention, there's a book that you can read about it, and I've lost the name of the book now for a second. I'll have to look it up. But in that, he explained that suffering cannot be compared. Like, if a man is living on the street and he's suffering every day, having the worst time of his life, and yet there's another man who is struggling with depression, in their heads, like mentally, the way their brain processes it is exactly the same. They would feel the same amount of depression, the same amount of sadness, even though the one is definitely worse off. And that makes it a very hard thing, because as humans, our natural tendency is to be like, it's not that bad. I have this, I have that. I have a house, I have food to eat, I have all of that, without realizing you know, that it's entirely possible to be empathetic towards other people whilst acknowledging that what you're going through in your head is very real, you know, and
Yeah.
uh, it's for you, it's the same amount of suffering. And it's a hard thing to come to terms with because, you know, you don't perceive it as that uh, consciously, but subconsciously, that's what your body does, you know.
Yeah, I think that is why I do these, and I even make some of my journal entries public, because not only am I opening myself up for other people's opinion, but I think it's really important to verbalize what you're thinking or write down what you're thinking, because I've got an idea that the concept that you're thinking about might, if you're breathing on it in your head, and it might sound like one way in your head, but until you verbalize and put it out there, it might it might, have you ever been in a situation when you say it out loud, it's actually quite ridiculous, or it's like, whoa, once I say it out loud, it's actually quite stupid, but I think
Yeah,
it's really
definitely.
important to actually verbalize a lot of these things, not only to share it with other people, but for you to actually kind of hear yourself in a third person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's true. And that's one big thing for me. That's I believe that's why the last 2 years have been particularly tough in terms of anxiety and depression or whatnot, is my form of verbalizing, which is also my form of escapism, has always been writing lyrics, working into whatever I'm going through, working that into a song. And sometimes, it's a very depressing train of thought and just like really, really depressing lyrics. And then you chuck that over some, fast drums and loud guitars, and suddenly it's a song. And the great thing about that is you manage to get on stage and you manage to shout those really sad lyrics at a bunch of people that are having a really good time. And by the end of that, you feel amazing
Yeah.
because you don't feel the sadness of the lyrics anymore. It just, you feel this is fine.
The
This is
empowerment
good
of it.
because you actually managed to get it out. And that's therapy on its own, and something I've been missing a lot over these last 2 years, not being able to play and whatever, because now you still write the lyrics, you still kind of get the songs, you get it out, but you don't actually get it out. Uh, there's a different thing to it, to be able to be on stage and actually um, sing it at people, then it feels like it actually does come out. But yeah, I would say um, it I don't think it's a actual field of therapy that exists, but I think it should be acknowledged as a useful therapeutic method. And I believe a lot of people have that in different ways as well, where you're not necessarily just writing uh, your in your journal, or publishing the journal. Some people just express it in different ways, like in different art forms, or getting it out in poetry or whatever, just because it's a good release, to get all of that out of you. Because if you just keep it inside, even if it seems crazy, even if it seems like it's not really such a big deal, whatever, if you don't write it down, or if you don't get it out some way, then it does become a big deal. Then those small little incessant thoughts become really big, angry ones, and they keep shouting over all your other thoughts, and then eventually you're crazy.
I like to think about keeping thoughts in your head as similar. It might be morbid, but similar to keeping a corpse under your bed. The longer you keep
Yeah,
that corpse under your bed, eventually you won't be able to sleep, because the smell is gonna keep you out until you go outside and get rid of it out of from under your bed. You're gonna sit with that corpse under your bed, and it's just gonna get worse day by day by day by day. But wouldn't you say, that suffering that you were talking about earlier, now that you're talking about art, right? Wouldn't you say you can actually compare that suffering to art, in the sense of one cannot compare art with each other, because the artist makes an art piece from what he feels like, and it can really not be, you can't say this art is better than that art. You've got no idea what's going on with why and where that person made it. And I actually think you can actually compare that suffering to actually the method behind art, because you can't really compare one suffering with another, because what you were talking about, what I think it's actually really beautiful is everybody's, between inverted commas, proverbial art slash suffering is relevant to them, but it can still be shared to the world, whether you like it, want to or not, but that can inspire people about their own art slash suffering.
It definitely can. I'll tell you, this is I won't, I don't mention names specifically, but I have a couple of people who I've grown to be friends with over the years that I've been fans of Ruff Majik through, one phase or another that we have gone through. And the usual start of the conversation would be someone at random, somebody I'd never met before, would send me a DM, or email or whatever. And it would be about one of our songs specifically. And they would be like, I really like the song because I feel like I'm having the same problem, or I'm dealing with the same thing, or something, I'm going through this same thing. Like, I really understand the lyrics. And then I've heard interpretations of the lyrics, which many times it's not what I meant to say by the lyrics. Sometimes people would be dead on, sometimes they would be somewhere thinking of it like in a very different way, but they would be dealing with their own problems, and they would use that as a method to kind of deal with it, and feel like maybe somebody else understands what I'm going through. And I've always really I've been proud of that to an extent, but also, it just feels good to be able to kind of help people in that way, which was never the purpose of it. It was just for my own selfish reasons of, getting it out so it doesn't keep mulling around in my head. But then, you hear it being spoken back to you, and somebody saying they were going through a tough time and this helped out. And then, yeah, that's I think it's a good thing. Like, people, I believe a lot of artists don't really realize to what extent they have helped people through certain things, because they might not be in contact with the people that they kind of helped through all of this, and it's a really good thing too, and it's given me some perspective in terms of the types of lyrics that I write, because it would be very depressing many times, verging on getting worrisome maybe. And I've had an introspection about that, where I was like, okay, in case somebody is in fact taking this up as literal, maybe I should word it the right way, so I don't sound like I'm glorifying things like suicidal tendencies or whatever. Not the band. The band's
you don't
great,
want
but I
to
mean,
spark something that could have been prevented. So you kind of have to alter what you're trying to say, carefully.
yeah. And I mean, I don't necessarily alter it to a point where it doesn't say what I wanted to say, but I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword in that way, because it's a good therapeutic thing, and it's good to kind of get this stuff out, but you also have to consider the power that words have, especially for people you don't know, because it could definitely create some unintended I don't know, side effects, I guess.
Animosity that comes with it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that has happened in the past with people that have taken art up to mean something and then, acted out on that, and it always turns out to be a very sad thing. That's not something anybody would want. But yeah,
But I also think,
yeah,
people tend to talk about what we're talking about as heavy stuff, as heavy feelings, but I can't help to see that being in tune with your emotional side, it carries a lot more inspirational weight than, the latter, overly happy, things like that. I just think the chance to inspire someone or the chance to change someone's life, the magnitude behind, a traumatic event, it's a lot, it's a lot bigger, it's a lot more weighted than your average human interactions, your day-to-day interactions, because people take the day-to-day for granted. People take the small things for granted, and they do sit and watch the sunrise and everything like that, and people do take the day-to-day things in from the from time to time. But I just think, as troublesome and horrific a traumatic experience can be, I just think there lies so much more beauty and inspiration that comes along with it if it can be interpreted correctly.
that's the thing. So, and I agree with you. Um, Largely, I think we're on the same page there. But it's in the way that it's interpreted, which is important, because
Yeah.
I always feel like you must be very, very careful of glorifying anxiety and depression, which is something that I see very regularly across social media and across just like general media that people are binging these days. And it's a troublesome thing, and it's a worrying thing, because there's a lot of people out there that literally, you know, they make it an aesthetic instead of realizing that it's a problem that people face and suffering that people are going through. And it's harmful because, you know, you end up influencing people and starting a cult of depression, which later becomes, a cult of suicidal feelings and whatever. And it's not healthy. Um, and
Because
yeah,
that
that's
also
all.
can be interpreted differently to other young influential children or whoever is influential mentally from there on out. So it's like a snowball effect, because however you react on someone, and if you're influential and you put it on social media, you can influence a lot more malleable people that comes along with it. So it creates this whole domino effect.
Exactly. Like whenever I'm talking about this specific topic, it always comes to mind the case of the suicide forest. Sorry, suicide forest in Japan, the one that's at the foot of Mount Fuji, and there's a lot of um, reasons for it, and many of them societal reasons in Japan. Of why this is caused, but a lot of people point a finger back to a novelization, which was, I don't remember in which era it was written in Japan, and um, it creates a kind of culture of glorifying the idea of suicide. And I've never read the book or whatever, and I'm not entirely sure what is inside of it. I've only been told, or I've heard accounts about it, but uh, it kind of created a romanticism around this whole idea of suicide in a forest or whatever. And um, that's a problem, because that something like that could become a runaway train, and then you've got like a culture develop around it. And yeah, it's just unhealthy, and yeah, it's not a good thing. And that's why I think you just have to be really careful with the way, especially if you're an artist, at whichever level. You don't have to be it doesn't matter if
Famous or
you're,
anything,
I don't,
yeah.
yeah, it's just you never realize what kind of potential influence you have on people, and
But
that's important to take account of.
yeah, but that again, that is also a double-sided sword, because now it boils down to what's perspective, because now you can talk about something traumatic and depressive, and you can talk about your anxiety, and to the right people it can influence them in the right way, but the wrong perspective can change that 100% as well. So as an artist, where do you draw that line? Or just as an average human being, just sharing something on Facebook or social media, where do you draw the line? Because let's say losing someone's relative can either be inspiring to someone, or it can, break them down emotionally to a whole new different level. I mean, you can see that in families, how certain people's deaths influence one person to actually, choose life and to live their life fullest, and to the rest of the family that can actually just, drown in that sea of depression. So, the perspective line gets a little bit gray.
Yes, it's true. And I mean, I don't have a clear answer for that, unfortunately. I would like
No.
to say that I know the right way to handle it. Um, I'm as careful as I could possibly be in the ways that I, um, you know, handle my writing and my posting and all that kind of stuff. But I do think unfortunately, there is no definite line where you can be 100% in the right and not necessarily influence someone in a way that you didn't mean to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
No, I guess what I'm
It's a
trying
tough
to say
situation.
is what I'm trying to say is, on a personal level, right? I think more people need to embrace their emotions to know how to deal with it, instead of trying to avoid it and not be sure how to handle it. Because how you as a person handle something. So I think where I'm trying to get at is how I handle something, for me, versus how I feel about it, and how versus other people seeing how I handle something is two different things. And I think people need to embrace their emotions a lot more instead of avoiding it, because how react towards certain emotions might, for you, think, okay, this is fine, this is normal, whatever. But you won't you spend a lot of time with people around you without knowing it. You can influence you from your closest friends to family members.
Yeah, that's true. You know, hmm, yeah. I don't really. It's a tough thing, man. It's a hard thing to think about. I honestly, the first time I specifically thought about influence was in a conversation with one of our mutual friends, actually, whose name we'll keep off the interweb because I don't know how he would feel about it. But he actually took me to task one time about um, something that I said off the cuff, not
Yeah.
something that I was thinking about particularly. And he, in the conversation, he said, it's important to remember that, you know, there's a lot of people around you, a lot of people who care, a lot of people who don't necessarily care, but, you know, the words they become influential in some way or another, or your actions for that matter. Um, yeah, and that's why I decided to try and keep a balance, but it's hard. Like I don't really have the answers to these things, you know. So I'm figuring it out on my own as I'm going along, and
No,
just
I
trying to figure
understand.
out the.
Same here on my side, and that is, that's probably, one of the biggest reasons I like to talk to people and, just hear people's stories, because, there's so much value behind listening to what people have to say, because who their character is and how they react to certain things, can actually inspire you to, implement some of those good or bad characteristics in your own life. And I think, being able to listen to someone talk is a valuable tool to have in today's society.
It definitely is. Um, we've come to a point where we don't really. listen to take in any information anymore, you know. And I think that's because of how society is. Like, we listen to have an answer. We don't necessarily listen to understand
Yeah.
what it is that someone's saying. And that's unfortunate, because I do like, there's a lot of help that you can give people if you actually listen to what they're saying and realize that they might be suffering or whatever. But there's also a lot of healing power in it. You know, you might, if you really listen to what someone's saying, you might pick up something that's useful for you in dealing with your own, uh, your own problems.
I know. And I think, yes, dude, one of my biggest downfalls is I have developed numerous amounts of unhealthy coping mechanisms for my anxiety and depression, and I think one of my biggest downfalls with that is when I fall back into a bad habit, instead of motivating myself of the progress, you think to yourself, here I am again. Why am I here again? Because that coping mechanism wasn't developed because of enjoyment or celebration or, rewarding yourself for it. It's actually a coping mechanism to actually, numb a certain pain or avoid a certain feeling. And I think one of my biggest downfalls is when I fall back in these coping mechanisms, that spirals that you're talking about just gets like 10 or 20 times worse.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a I'm having a coping mechanism as we speak, but it's a thing though that you shouldn't end up chastising yourself. You can't beat yourself up about falling into a certain bad habit or doing whatever it's necessary to do. And the ideal is to realize you've done it, but also to keep your mind on the progress and to focus on what you are in fact doing to better yourself, because otherwise the spiral will continue. And as I'm saying this, it's something that I'm very guilty of as well. I would find myself being enraged at myself for lapsing into my old habits and then taking days to manage to get back on track,
Yeah, but it's so
if
much.
at all.
That's what the frustration boils down with me, because I know, catching myself in that act, will take 2 or 3 days of my time, and I don't have that time to waste. You don't. I don't have that time to recuperate and get back on that horse again. So that's why I get frustrated and angry at myself, because I would like to avoid it and just kind of, continue my life in a very easy straight. And the only person sabotaging my progress is me. So, yes, I get it. It's that 2 or 3 days just trying to let yourself, it's okay to have downtime. Fuck that. You know, just try and at least not, take that 2 or 3 days to get over it, because this is not the first time this is happening. And that's why I'm angry at myself, because it's the same habit over and over again. And recognizing your bad habits has become a bad habit as well.
Mm-hmm. But that's what I'm saying. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's imperative that you're not that hard on yourself, and not be angry at yourself, because it's the first thing you do. Usually when as I've perceived so far from speaking to other people that deal with these same types of issues, it's not a thing of blame it on anyone else. You blame it on yourself, but that creates a bigger problem that makes your initial problem bigger than it was before. And it gets bad. And I mean, it's not easy. I have the same problem. I can't do downtime. I'm in Leidenberg right now doing downtime. That's the purpose of my month away from, let's say, social media and uh, contact with the outside world, is to have downtime. And I still catch myself uh, being angry at myself for not taking, not uh, doing the necessary things, and I end up still getting myself stuck in a kind of endless process of doing half as jobs of things that I could do better if I just had some mental
Yeah.
fortitude,
Yeah.
because I can't slow myself down to chill out about it. But I feel like it's necessary, because otherwise the spiral continues and then it becomes never ending. So somewhere you need to break the cycle and kind of you just pull yourself towards yourself, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know it sounds very easy to say, but doing it is another thing, because just because you know, I sometimes sit and think to myself, okay, things are going well right now. And then you sit and you think to yourself, a little too well, you know?
Yeah.
You know?
and then and that's crazy. Like I have that too so many times. It's the weirdest thing. Like like I would get good news and I'm like, oh, hold on, it must be
Yeah,
coming. I don't know what's coming,
yeah,
but it's
but
coming.
something's coming.
I'm acutely aware of my, of imminent doom at all times. And then, at some point, like a week later, when you've reached a different spiral altogether, you're like, oh wait, hold on, that was actually just like some really good news. Like,
Yeah.
why couldn't I just enjoy it when it was happening?
Yeah, it's like,
You know?
and then you get angry at yourself. I was like, fuck, why can't I just enjoy things?
Yeah, why am I not having a good time? I should be having a good time. It's 12 past good time o'clock. And then and it just, yeah. But that's the thing. It's like, because we're hard on ourselves, and it's a very, it's I think it's a sign of the times. It's something that's it's uh, a part of our culture, of the way we live, of the way we're taught to live, that you know it's about reaching your full potential and being productive in a productive society, and doing all of the right things at the right times. And then the moment you kind of step outside of that boundary, it becomes a thing where uh, you're angry at yourself, because you're comparing yourself to impossible ideals that nobody could, you know,
But
really reach.
don't you think being aware of your own emotional state is like a superpower? I just can't help to think, like being consciously aware of things like depression and anxiety. I don't want to say put you a step ahead, but it makes that spirals and downtime a lot easier to handle the next time, because I think there are people going through their lives. Not It's like, I normally see what we're talking about now today as, let's say, it's a language, right? It's English, and we are Afrikaans people, but we are actively trying to learn how to speak English. And there's people going out in their lives blissfully unaware, speaking Afrikaans for the whole entire lives, not actually trying to speak English and learn more about it. So I don't know if that metaphor solidifies what I'm trying to say, but I'm just thinking, working on your own emotions is like a muscle, or like playing guitar. And the more you actively practice or acknowledge it, the better you get at it.
That is true in a sense, I think. And I do believe it's a good thing to have, but also it does have an unfortunate side effect, where if it is a superpower, it is also uh, the weakness of the superpower, because it can become a part of the spiral. I've found, for me personally, that thinking about the fact that I have anxiety and acknowledging the fact that I have anxiety sometimes triggers the anxiety, thinking that I haven't had an anxiety attack in a while. I'm due for one, surely, because I know how this works. And I think that's something that's important to recognize, is, like you were saying, it's a language, right? And you're learning the language. And it's important to realize that there's also always something new that you can learn about it. So you mustn't get into a comfortable space where you think, I understand this, I know where I'm at, and I know how to deal with this. And then that ends up causing other problems as well, because you think you have a handle on it when really you don't,
No,
And I'm not saying that's the case for you personally, but I'm just saying that's I think an important aspect to consider as well, because I think it's important to learn about this stuff and get in touch with it. But at the same time, it's good to keep your wits about you, to realize that you don't know everything.
no, I mean, I guess where I'm getting at with this is, staying with the superpower metaphor, like what Uncle Ben said, with great power and great responsibility and everything, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not saying, being aware of this will eventually give us full enlightenment where we can sit back and say, haha, I'm totally impermeable to depression. But I'm just saying, it basically gives you, that thick, leathery skin towards, everything that comes at you, that what doesn't kill you make you stronger type thing. Because I've seen so many people who's always been so happy and so, joyful their whole entire lives, where a small, I don't want to, almost say the word a small thing, but something like death can totally tip them over and, ruin their whole entire lives, versus, actually just knowing that they need how to deal with it.
Yeah, but then in the same sense, and I understand exactly what you're saying, but I think that's the reason why things like therapy and like cognitive behavioral therapy and all of that exists, is because people don't necessarily have the tools to deal with it, or even the tools to recognize what's happening. And the point of therapy is kind of to equip people with those tools and to kind of help them figure out that, listen, you're not dying, you're having depression or you're having anxiety, and there are ways to deal with this. And that's why I think all of that kind of came into existence over time. And I do think it helps to have an idea of it, to know what it is you're going through or whatever, and to know that you're able to get help, because a lot of people don't know that. But that's why a conversation like this is also important, in my opinion, and having it out in the public as well, because there might be people dealing with this that do not realize that it's something that they could take steps to not prevent, not cure necessarily, but to live with it. And they wouldn't realize if they hadn't, tuned in and kind of found it in this way.
I think that's really important, because you are so influenced by the home and the friends you have. If you are surrounded by an environment where nobody talks about these things and you have to keep it for yourself, and you're not surrounded by people who openly talk about things like this, just being able to find out somewhere in this life that there are other people who also feel like that, I think it's something magnificently beautiful.
Yeah, no, it's a very important aspect. And now that you said it, I want to also or it brought to mind that another thing about these kinds of conditions are that they have been for the longest time, and still to a certain degree are very taboo, and not taken seriously, or believed to be just weakness instead of actual sickness. And I know a lot of people talk about this online and whatever, but it's still a problem that we have in our society, where somebody would be like, listen, I'm struggling with depression, or I feel like
Yeah, get
everything's
over
too much or
yourself,
whatever.
man. We all just get over it. It's not that bad, And you're like,
Yeah,
okay.
and a lot of them are the back in my day clan, but
Yeah.
there's also other people.
Back
And
in
I mean,
my day, clan.
yeah, the type. But
Yeah.
but it's a real thing. And I mean, for those people, at the same time, back in their day, there were a lot of people dealing with depression and struggling with anxiety and all of this stuff, but it wasn't spoken about. It wasn't necessarily investigated to the same extent. They didn't have all the treatments and the therapies and all the ideas about it as acutely formed as we have them now. And that's, so it's sad to hear people say, yeah, back in my day, because it always makes me think, in fact, back in your day, you probably had some friends that were struggling terribly
And
with
you
depression
were
and nobody knew.
blissfully unaware of it.
Exactly. So that's yeah, it's a thing that happens, but it's not only that. I mean, it's sometimes even a cultural things. We have many of our
yeah, dude. I was thinking about this the other day. Culture can also, you know, be a very big catalyst in this.
yeah, I mean, many of our fellow country people. What's the right term for
Our
countrymen?
folk.
People know what I'm. Yeah, many of our folk. Yeah, but I mean now in South Africa specifically, there are whole entire cultures that do not uh, consider mental illness to be a reality. They don't think it's a real thing. And that's an actual thing that happens where people don't in some areas and in some places in the world, they don't get treated for depression because depression isn't a thing that exists for them. And that's it's a
Yeah, some medical
it's
aids
a
in South Africa don't cover it at all.
yeah, and that's crazy. But and I sorry, crazy is probably also not a nice word to use. But it's yeah, it's horrifying to think about because it's not something that it's only now being, or it not now only, but I mean, it seems like a more recent thing in uh,
Due to
human history where there's this
recent
kind of
circumstances.
yeah, and it's people are starting to take some of this more seriously, and a lot of people I think that believed they were impervious to this kind of thing, or they couldn't possibly ever become depressed or anxious or whatever, are now dealing with it because nobody was expecting the impact of these last 2 years. And now we have a problem. Now there's lots of people who are having a real intense time, and suddenly it's a thing where everybody realizes you know they're not necessarily equipped to deal with this, and people that know about it aren't necessarily equipped to deal with it. And yeah, it's a very dark time right now, and it's really easy to kind of get lost in it. So
I
yeah,
think
I
where it
don't really
boils
know.
down to is just my own perspective of what I'm feeling, because yeah, I also used to be one of those people who didn't believe it to be a thing because it never happened to me. I never knew a life of stress. I never really knew a life of any sadness, or I was one of those emo kids who just really liked the style, but I couldn't help myself to always be happy, But where
Uh-huh.
where I'm going at with this is I'm 31 years on this planet, and I was constantly around people. I was constantly because you need to adapt. You're not the same with every single person around you the whole time, because you need to adapt and feed from that person's energy, right? And how
Mm-hmm.
often are you just with yourself? If you have to take all of the time you literally just spent alone, 80 to 90% of the average person's life you've actually spent with family members and people around you. I'm not counting sleeping, but I'm just saying your mind is constantly distracted. I mean, how often do you actually really take time to get to know who you are? And I know this might sound very cliche to say out loud, but I've actually recently, 3 years ago, found out really I don't really like drinking. I don't even know why I did do it the whole time. It's thinking about it actually makes me like curious to find out why I started in the first place, because I don't like it at all. also found out I really don't like being in large groups of people, and you've met me would probably think the latter, because I've never actually really took the time to actually sit and think to myself, what is it that I do like and don't like?
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think and that's why a lot of these last 2 years kind of, I think, has set off a lot of these things for people, or kind of triggered a lot of this stuff,
Yeah,
because
because now you need
people
to acknowledge who you are,
now
it's something you never done.
you're forced to spend time with yourself and realize things about yourself that maybe you did not want to realize, um, or maybe it's good in a sense, like it's fantastic that you realized you don't like drinking. I would like to realize that at some point as well, but so far it's not happened. But I mean, it's a real thing, and it's a real weird thing. Like, people don't realize what it means to be alone with their thoughts. And then there's the argument that people would make that I spend a lot of time alone, just being on my own, and not doing things with people. But it's also not true. It's also always filled with distraction. You
Yeah,
don't spend a lot of
gaming
time
or reading books or whatever. You don't
yeah,
actually
and
actively
not that
trying
I'm
to find out. Yeah.
exactly, and not that I'm saying any of that is uh not worthwhile and things that people shouldn't be doing. I mean, if you want to
Of
binge
course.
watch The Office 2 times in a row, then fucking do it. That's your own prerogative. But that's not, in my opinion, alone time. That's not actually figuring
That's
out
still a
what's happening
distraction,
inside of
yeah,
your head.
because you're not actively doing anything about your mental health. You're still avoiding yourself.
That's true. But also, we must be careful of making it sound like we are berating people for not
Or,
actively doing things about their mental health.
or that we
But
hate the
yeah,
office.
yeah, no, but I'm sure people get where we're coming from. But yeah, no, and it's a real thing. I mean, I like distracting myself as much as possible. Just and it's not necessarily the most healthy thing, but it's something that many times helps me to calm down. Is just chilling, watching something. A lot of times it's like a comfort show, something that I have watched
Yeah.
before, and I kind of know where things are going, and it does help to some degree. But it shouldn't be a crutch. That's the thing. You shouldn't
Yeah.
find yourself having to rely on that, because then essentially you probably have a bigger problem that you need to be dealing with.
Yeah, the escapism is not really gonna assist you with regards to probing the difficulties of your mental health. It's simply also exactly the same. Well, no, pardon me.
Well, it's just
It's
escapism.
similar. It's similar to numbing the pain towards other unhealthy coping mechanisms.
Yeah, no, that's what it is. That's exactly the right word, escapism. It's something you use to escape whatever scenario it is that you find yourself in. And whether that be, uh, drinking or smoking weed, or watching Friends, even though I don't like Friends. But anyway, if people like Friends,
Thank.
that's cool for them.
That's very cool
But
for them. I agree.
yeah, but yeah, more power to them. But I mean, like, but all of that boils down to the same thing. It's a way to kind of get outside of your own thought patterns, and it works. It's like, to a certain degree. For many people, I think it works for their whole life. They never
Yeah.
have to think about anything specifically, they never have to come to the point where they need to specifically deal with something about themselves, because they will always have some or other form of escapism. um, and for other people it works up to a point, and then they realize, um, you know they're watching the screen, but they're not taking anything in, because they're just an anxious mess, and then it
Yeah.
becomes time to deal with it.
I think that's that escapism is that frustration I was talking about earlier. Would sometimes find myself saying like, "Listen, dude, you always said you wanted to work on your own mental health when you've got time. Here you are in that same form of escapism again. And that is that habits I was talking about earlier, that is where my frustration comes. I actively want to do this with regards to me finding out who I am, but I would much rather, it's easier to fall in that escapism. And I think that's where that frustration with myself comes from.
Yeah, but then, like I said earlier, I think it's important to realize that you shouldn't be frustrated with yourself about it.
Yeah.
Just try again. And if it takes 1,000 more tries, that's fine too. But yeah, I don't think it's important to realize that you shouldn't beat yourself up about it, because then you end up just beating yourself up, and then
using yourself as a proverbial punching bag, basically.
Exactly. And then something that could have been a relaxing, nice experience becomes anxious, terrifying experience, and an angry experience, and then that ends up being all you have all the time, because you're anxious about not
being
resting
anxious.
And then yeah, you get anxious about being anxious, and that's that's bad.
Anxious Maximus.
Anxious Maximus.
Listen, Johni Holiday, I just would like to thank you for coming on my show. It was absolutely phenomenal to have you on board. And I'm going to ask you something. I ask absolutely everybody on the show, if there's something that you would like to leave the listeners with, now is your time.
Sure. Oh, putting me on the spot there.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I feel like right now I would like to say, if this was a couple of months ago, I would have said, check out my new album or whatever, but that's not the case right now. I think I just want people to know that if you are dealing with mental health issues, and many of us are, many of us are, it's important to realize that you're not alone, and to realize that it is possible to deal with it. It's possible in many different ways. And you are able to get the help that you need. So yeah, I just want people to know that they're not broken, and they're able to get back to where they want to be. Yeah, just don't feel hopeless. I know everyone's feeling hopeless,
but don't.
It's fine. It's fine if you are. I understand it 100%, but it's possible to get back out and not feel hopeless again.
Johni, thank you very, very much again for coming on the show. And I would just like to say you should have an absolutely phenomenal evening, and good luck with all of your future ventures.
Thanks, man. And same to you. And hopefully we'll be able to get together again soon and have a hang, and then we can record that.
We can record having a hang. We'll call it hanging out with Johni on a holiday. We'll go on a holiday and we'll record it.
Yeah, let's go on a holiday. Exactly. That's a fantastic idea.
Awesome, dude. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You as well, man. Cheers.